Hello, everybody. And today we have our first interview podcast with our member, Sybrand Strauss. And he is a member of Audiology Private Practice Forum, APPF. And today we are looking into who are our members and what are they passionate about. And we're trying to find out about what every member is specializing in or focusing on in terms of their practice. And we also want to find out some audiology hacks that we can learn from each other. So introducing Sybrand, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
It's so
I
exciting.
really appreciate it.
We're very, very excited. So just to introduce the listeners and watchers is that this is going to be a new series that we're going to start. And Sybrand and I are going to be running with interviews and podcasts of members and other exciting people that we can interview on APPF. So watch the space for exciting topics to listen to. And so the first one, as I said today, Sybrand wanted to learn a little bit about you, and I believe that you opened your practice in 2016.
Yes, Cara, and yeah, I'm really excited to chat to you. Thanks for having me on. And I am really humbled by the fact that you want to know a little bit more about who I am and the practice. So keen to chat to you. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So yeah, I started the practice 2016. It's been going 6 years. I've been in the audiology profession. What's it now? It's 14 years as a private practice audiologist, but 6 years having my own practice here in Panorama in Cape Town, lovely Cape Town.
Beautiful. And Sybrand, what made you open your own practice?
Yeah, so my sister is a speech therapist, and she told me about the audiology course. And at that time, I decided, okay, let me enroll in UCT for the course. And yeah, and as they say, the rest is history.
It was. I also studied at UCT, Sybrand. And what year did you qualify?
Yes, so 2008.
Oh, I'm showing my age. Okay. So we just missed each other. I won't say if I was before or after. And I see that you have a very keen interest in tinnitus management. So one of the biggest areas of audiology I can definitely say is tinnitus, because there's so much online with regards to herbal remedies or even worse, where everyone is told that there's no cure for tinnitus. So what do you do with regards to tinnitus patients? Where does your passion lies in terms of the assessment or management, and what do you enjoy about tinnitus patients?
Thanks for the question. I think one of my passions, Cara, is specifically because there has been this myth in the industry that there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to live with it. I think that was sort of the catalyst that got me into saying, now we do, as an audiologist, I do want to offer help, and I do want to offer possible solutions and at least hope for a person that there is something that you can do about the perception of tinnitus. And so for me, I really held to the tinnitus retraining therapy model. And so it's really important for me when I see a person first in terms of the counseling process to try and do away with any myths that the person may have come across in their tinnitus journey. And my heart is always, first of all, to make a person just feel comfortable about the fact that there is a process to follow. And so for me, it is about the tinnitus retraining model, and maybe we can go into a bit more detail with regards to that, but that's the heart behind it. That's why I find it so interesting. Like I mentioned, I really enjoy working with people, and there's something in terms of probably the sympathy and empathy that I have for a person when they are in a hopeless situation. And as we know, there are differences in terms of how a person experiences tinnitus, and it's not necessarily always that it's a hopeless feeling. but I would say that that was the catalyst for me to say, I really want to spend some time on this. And I love the fact that it is a fairly mysterious field in audiology. So I often, hold talks, even if it is just informational talks at different places, or if I get invited, and I love talking about tinnitus and then balance and vertigo, especially, simply because it is the tinnitus more so mysterious, but simply because it is fairly untouched areas. Usually people don't necessarily talk about that specifically because it is so intricate and takes a lot of time.
Absolutely. So I found it interesting so I also have a keen interest in tinnitus, so I just started that as well. So that's very nice to chat and to bounce ideas off. And the fact that you were thinking about doing psychology and then ended up with audiology and then dealing with tinnitus patients, well, I think there's your overlap there. And you may not have qualified as a psychologist, but you probably end up doing a lot of psychology work, right?
Yeah.
Do you find? Yeah, so I find that there's a massive difference between a patient with tinnitus and a tinnitus patient. And I found that that's quite interesting. And do you end up having a specific plan, like a rehab plan? You know that you're going to see a patient, say, for example, 6 sessions or 8 sessions or 3 sessions. Do you have something like that you explain to patients beforehand? Because I find quite often that the patient with tinnitus, or the tinnitus patient, is someone that's very highly strung and someone that is generally either suffering from anxiety or depression or something underlying that. So I find that sometimes they need the guidance and the structure of being told, well, you're going to see me for X number of sessions, and this is what I'm going to do in every session. Do you do the same thing?
So usually it is always dependent on the first session that I have with the person. And usually I'll in that session get the feeling as to what is going to be the plan for it. But absolutely, I mean, certain people I schedule for more than one session. I would want it to say obviously, but it's not necessarily obviously, but I do schedule them for more than one session. And there's other people that I only do see for one session and then follow up in 3 months or 6 months time, depending on what we discuss. But it is very dependent on the person. And as you say, getting a feeling if in that consultation, if I do see somebody that is a tinnitus patient and not necessarily, somebody with tinnitus, that I handle that very differently. And the former will have longer sessions or more sessions, and the latter probably a shorter span of rehabilitation. But I do always go through the process of sound therapy and sound stimulation and continuous TRT counseling as well. That's really important. Then usually I'm guided by those sessions. I must mention that one of the big things that I think is becoming a little bit more solidified is the cognitive behavioral therapy. And I would oftentimes do part of that as well. But if I see that it needs to be a little bit more extensive and in-depth, then I actually refer out for that as well.
Do you have within your network like psychologists and psychotherapists that are in tune and understand about the model of tinnitus and understand about the foundation of tinnitus, but the overlapping cognitive behavioral requirements that they need? Do you have that type of team available to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, it is just a case-by-case basis that I would refer out and still building the relationship. But yeah, there's a specific psychologist and then an ear, nose and throat specialist that specializes in CBT as well. So that's good. It's a good network to have.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's great. So the aim, of course, is to try and dissipate those assumptions that so many people are given, even by medical professionals, to tell that it can't be cured and they have to live with it for forever. And I find that also that overlap between a patient who has tinnitus and hyperacusis and misophonia, I find that those three tend to all overlap Do you deal also with people that have misophonia and hyperacusis?
Yeah, so hyperacusis, limited, but usually in those cases I do refer out. There's somebody that I trust. So I've let's say, held myself rather to tinnitus and focus on that as the more, let's call it again, mysterious. I don't know if that's the correct description, but let's say mysterious field and complex field as well. But Cara, I know you are interviewing me, but yeah, just for interest's sake, how's it been for you? Would you say that a big portion of people that you see in your practice is tinnitus patients as well, and has that been a big focus of yours?
It's been quite recent for me. I would say in the last 2 years I started becoming interested in tinnitus, and I think it started with the pandemic, and a lot of people with their mental health was seriously affected. And I think also with the lockdowns, a lot of people ended up being online a lot more, reading up on different articles, and becoming more and more anxious with the world around them. And I do find that people have been more in tune maybe with their own bodies since the beginning of this pandemic, but I also find that there now are people that are questioning and sending emails and just asking the necessary questions. Not always do they make appointments to come in, and I don't know about you, but of course we have to make sure that the patient doesn't have a hearing loss, and a lot of the time it is hearing loss related, and so we end up having to treat that and as a spin-off. A lot of the time their tinnitus is improved, maybe because their stress levels are better, maybe they don't have to concentrate as much during a conversation, but maybe also just because the noise around them is not as loud, and so that so the noise around them is actually not as quiet, and so the environment that they find themselves in is not as quiet, and so they're not able to hear the tinnitus as much. So a lot of the time I'm finding it is someone that's highly strung. It's the situation that we often find ourselves in during this hectic change in lifestyle around the world as a result of the pandemic. But I do find that people are definitely more in tune with their bodies and with being concerned. I did see also, I don't know about you, have you seen patients that have had COVID with some strange audiological outcomes and tinnitus?
During this time of the pandemic, there's definitely been an influx for me of seeing people with tinnitus. And I think you're absolutely right. Part of that is environment. So people were at home. It's generally, depending how many kids you have and how many young kids you have, it's generally been quiet working from home. And so people have started to notice that they hear this ringing sound or buzzing sound. And I think for those that are watching that are also interested in wanting to know about tinnitus, it is incredible, is it not, the effect that stress and anxiety can have on the perception of tinnitus. That's a big trigger. And what I found, Cara, I don't know about you, very interesting, usually about 2 months after a period of immense stress and anxiety, or a big life change, let's say, for example, moving or changing jobs, or the pandemic, lockdown, usually 2 months after that, the person starts to experience the perception at its most or at its worst. And you're right, oftentimes I obviously do a hearing evaluation first when I see somebody with tinnitus. And again, for those that are watching, oftentimes it can be a combination of factors. So it can be partly hearing loss accompanied with stress and anxiety. And, as we know, even if you clench on your teeth at night, which again might be because you are stressed and you're an anxious person, that can also play a role. So there's a whole range of different things that can be one thing on its own, or it can be a combination of a range of factors. But that's been really interesting to me, just to come back to that point of the pandemic and stress and anxiety, and to see how that really has affected people's emotional well-being, and then that physical representation of suddenly hearing tinnitus.
Absolutely. I find 100% right. It's like a manifestation of of their current state of mind, they tend to pin it on something. And it's easier to blame something, right? So a lot of people will blame it on the tinnitus, or their tinnitus will go loud and they're more aware of it. Other people will blame it on lack of sleep, or blame it on their partner, or blame it on eating habits, or whatever. But there is a definite percentage of the population who will pin it on either hearing loss or tinnitus. I find also when we're talking about hearing loss and the emotional status of a person, do you also find that those people who have hearing loss, already an underlying hearing loss, or even a hearing aid user, when they're in a state of emotional distress, their hearing becomes worse? And it's not necessarily that they're having a drop in their hearing, but they're having a drop in their ability to cope and process information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to the fact that, you know, we often talk about nerve processing, and hearing is in the brain and the brain processing. And absolutely, I think if you've got a big cognitive emotional load, it just makes it so difficult even just to process efficiently. And that comes down to all forms of processing, I think, including auditory processing.
Absolutely.
No, definitely. But it is so rewarding, I think, Cara, to in a field like that, to say to a person that there is something that you can do about it. The myth of there's nothing you can do about it. To sit with a person and say, these are the steps that we're going to take in terms of having the actual goal of you perceiving tinnitus less. And that's so rewarding to be able to walk that road with people and really making a difference in that way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like what you said earlier on, there's so many layers, right? It's like peeling an onion. I find that there's layer over layer over layer, and we have to, it's our job, even though we're not trained psychologists, but it's our job to try and peel those layers to find out what is the root cause of where they're going wrong. And I also find that daunting thought of that no one can fix me, there's no cure, it definitely exacerbates the tinnitus. It heightens their stress, increases blood pressure. But also I find that if you tell someone that there's no cure, that's going to just play on their mind for the longest time. Whereas even just sitting down with an audiologist who understands tinnitus, and this is why being an independent audiologist for me is so important. It's adds so much more value than just going into a shop and getting your hearing tested or screened for free, and you don't get to the bottom of what the real problem is. But I find that very often the tinnitus patient who is highly strung and very anxious or even depressed is immediately calmed down as soon as they just sit down and listen and have someone in front of them that really understands what they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we have a look on a scale that we, audiologists might often use, for somebody that's watching as well, it is really rewarding, I'll use that word again, when you can have somebody that might say, one, it's not bothering me at all, I hardly ever hear it, maybe a little bit at night, to 10 being, I want to take my life because of this sound that I'm hearing. And having somebody, let's say, half their score just by sitting with you and you going through the process of what it is, why people are hearing tinnitus in the first place, and what are the steps that we are going to take to address it. And it might often then half, so it might go from a 6 to a 3. And that really is rewarding. That's not even getting to the steps of actually, physically trying to do something about it to minimize that perception. That's just the reassurance that people need, like you say now, that here there is help, and being told that there's nothing that you can do about it, that probably doubles the effect on that scale from a 3 to a 6 or 4 to a 8. Absolutely, yes. 100%.
Sybrand, do you use any of those hearing aids that have a tinnitus feature inside them, the masking features, or or some other products which have music playing in the background. Do you use that, and have you found that to be successful?
So I do in select cases. So generally my experience in my practice has been in accordance with research that shows about 9 out of 10 people that have hearing loss and have amplification, or let's say that have hearing loss and then perceive tinnitus, that get amplification as a solution, that they start to minimize their perception of tinnitus, or the tinnitus goes away, the perception of the tinnitus goes away. And that's been my experience, even in my practice, that about 9 out of 10 people, the tinnitus actually minimizes, or the perception of tinnitus completely goes away whilst the person are wearing hearing aids. That's been my experience. But that means I also do have that 1 in 10 people that even if I do provide amplification and we make sure that it's verified and they have good amplification and it's correctly set for them, the hearing aids, that it does not do anything to alleviate their perception of tinnitus. In rare cases, it can actually amplify it or make it worse. So in those cases, for people that love to spend time on their own reading, quiet time, but they don't want to take the hearing aids out, I do offer that solution of then having an extra program that's got a tinnitus masking function, or introducing music or something that the person can listen to. I find in most cases, I always say to a person that what we need to focus on is that you never have the feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm going to be alone with the tinnitus. So when I go to bed at night, it's going to be a negative experience, or when I'm going to be in this quiet room. So oftentimes what I try and do is provide the amplification for mostly during the day, in the waking hours. And the moment you go to bed, that you then have the sound therapy is what I call it, but that you have a dedicated app on your smartphone that you can put on a speaker or another sound device, or earphones that's comfortable to sleep with, and then have those relaxing ocean sounds or forest sounds or music or something that you want to listen to. So that in combination makes that you never go and be alone with your tinnitus and think, oh my goodness, is it worse today? Is it less? Is it going to change? Why do I have it? Those thoughts, to try and control that. So just to tie it all together in terms of the question you asked, yes, sometimes I do use it, but in rare cases, because I first try and see if the amplification on its own, if I fine-tune that hearing aid, if that is enough for the person to experience that they're not hearing it. Because ultimately, we want to provide as little crutches as possible for a person to cope with it. So I always first do one solution, verify and make sure what the difference is for the person, and then take it from there.
And talking about music and going into a different topic slightly, I see that you are an avid musician and singer. A perfect combination for an audiologist. I mean, you can't exactly be tone deaf, right? And you've had 2 albums.
Yeah, so that's something that very few people will actually know me in professional capacity. But I always joke, Cara, I say that audiology is my hobby.
Right.
And music is my career, struggling musician.
100%.
No, but I really enjoy it. I've got a family that's quite musical, so I inherited that talent, let's say, without sounding boastful. And yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Started making or picking up the guitar in 2001.
Wow.
And then started writing music. It was horrible at first, and then started getting better at it, like any skill. And yeah, then we started out as a band in 2006 in our local church. We started a new youth service. And from that point on, we just wrote, it was Afrikaans music.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, Afrikaans music, and but with quite an alternative rock type feeling to it. And yeah, and then we released 2 albums. We toured across South Africa, playing different churches and different venues. Really fun.
Amazing.
I really enjoy it. And to this day, I still write, make music. At the moment, I'm just doing it as a solo musician. But yeah, keeps me busy and keeps me out of trouble.
That's amazing. Well, maybe, just maybe, at the end of this video, we can put a link at the bottom with 1 or 2 of your tracks, and then everyone can have a listen to Mr. Sybrand Strauss.
Sounds good. Yeah, we can do that.
You were talking about questionnaires, and I'm going a little bit back and forth with tinnitus, but maybe what we could also do is, if you have a standardized questionnaire format that you use, we could have it as a PDF to download for members of the public, or even other audiologists who are interested in expanding their field of service provision to tinnitus. And maybe we can share with our colleagues and also share with the public, so that if someone from the public is concerned about tinnitus, they could have a look at the questionnaire and see whether it's of concern, and other audiologists who can upskill their service provision, or at least just offer their patients some information about tinnitus. Maybe we should share your questionnaires that you use.
Absolutely. I think that there are a vast range of wonderful resources as a starting point for a person. Although I would say this, I think that for any audiologists that want to venture further into tinnitus, I think it's really important to always remember, I know this is going to sound maybe really simplistic, and I won't say a cliche. It's going to sound really simplistic, but I'll say it anyway. I think it's really important to remember that the person sitting across from you is a person just like you, and they've got their own things that are going on during the week, and they've got their own troubles to worry about. And the tinnitus is just added to all of those issues we all have on a daily basis. And it's really important to remember that when you venture into that, to rather approach it like a conversation, to make them feel at ease. So yes, there's wonderful resources, and I think that is a good starting point. Absolutely, one needs to know what are the important things to ask and look out for. But you know, use that only as a guide, and start to become comfortable in having a conversation, so that you make that person feel at ease. Like we mentioned, that is the first priority that you have, is that they trust you, and that they feel that they can be comfortable, and that they are having a conversation, that you are really, really listening to what they have to say. And that ultimately will guide you. If you've got knowledge on the subject, take each person as their individual, realizing that they've got their own things that they need to deal with, and just like all of us. And that will really guide you in asking the next thing, and being genuine about it, asking the next question that's going to help you to find out how is this affecting them emotionally, and what is then the next step as to how much time you're going to spend with this person.
Do you find that sometimes the significant other is one of the key people that either can make it or break it for the person that's suffering from tinnitus? So I find that when there's an emotional overlay and it's linked in some way to the relationship that they're having with their partner, it's often because their partner is just unable to perceive or empathize with them, to understand what it is that they're dealing with on a regular basis, and to get them to understand. And I find that although some partners are really interested in trying to help, or trying to be patient and listening and comforting, they also are quite limited in their ability to understand what they're going through, and to support them through this challenging time. So what I generally do when I put them in the booth for the hearing test, I'll do a tinnitus match, and it's normally somewhere around 6 decibels SPL. And then I put the significant other in the booth, and I play that sound through the speakers just for 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute even, and say to them, this is what your partner is dealing with all the time. And they suddenly, it's just the penny drops. and they are so much more empathetic to just, I'm so sorry that you have to deal with this all the time. Somehow I need to be the person that's going to be here to help you and to help you through this, to hold your hand, to try and understand what you're going through. So I found that was a really cool hack.
Yeah, that is great. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to remember that. That's a great tip, Cara.
Yeah, it was great. It really works. They suddenly have a realization of this is the sound that they're hearing, because as you'll know, and as most people will know, or audiologists will know, but the public doesn't know that probably 90% of people have tinnitus, but it's not bothersome, and we experience it from time to time, and it's normal to experience it. But the pathological tinnitus is when it gets louder and louder, and it exacerbates everything, and it makes it difficult to concentrate, makes it difficult to sleep, and then it affects a person's relationship with their significant other. So yeah, I found that was really useful in getting the other person to just understand what they're experiencing.
No, that is really valuable, and I always try and do tinnitus matching. I've also seen the benefit in that. The moment you just have some sort of objective verification for the person to say, yes, that is what I'm hearing. How did you do that? How did you come up with that? And it just says, okay, I'm not imagining it. And finally somebody can hear what I'm hearing. But including the spouse in that, I think, yeah, that's a fantastic tip.
It really does help.
Yeah.
Sybrand, what is a comprehensive screening examination of vestibular function?
So the term is a bedside examination, but usually for the public, I'm hesitant to say a bedside examination because that makes it feel like it needs to be in your home, or people are not sure what it entails. But that is basically a screening of vestibular function without the dedicated equipment that can evaluate eye tracking and so forth. So for me, it includes screening function. As we know, most people, when they experience vertigo, probably, don't quote me on this, but probably 95% of the time, it is benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, BPPV, which is if somebody is listening and they say, yeah, I experience vertigo, usually when your head changes to a certain position, oftentimes when you get out of bed, or when you go to bed at night, or you roll over in bed, or you look up to take a cup out of the cupboard, or you bend down to pick up something and you think, wow, for 10 seconds or so, I'm having this spinning sensation, and luckily then it goes away, but it's really irritating and frustrating, and I'm concerned what's happening. Usually 95%, don't quote me on it, 95% of the time, that is BPPV. And the nice thing about offering that service here in my practice is that doing the canalith repositioning procedure, which has been the gold standard for so long, has been proven so successful to sort out BPPV. And it usually takes 1 session or 5 minutes, or in certain cases 2 sessions, and in very few cases 3 sessions, but it's really short and easily sorted out. So doing that, and I'll get to the comprehensive part just now, but doing that screening for BPPV oftentimes, is enough for me to help a person that's experiencing vertigo that's really debilitating for them. For the rest, I have a look at peripheral versus central function, and depending on what I find, so I've got a whole range of bedside examinations that I do. And and that leads me to see whether it's possibly peripheral or central, and then again I refer out to a very trusted balance specialist.
So what I was thinking is also at the end of this video, what we could do is list those practices or members of APPF who are offering screening as well as diagnostic vestibular assessment and rehabilitation. So those people who are battling with their balance, with vertigo, there will be a list of practices after this video that all offer balance assessment and something called most likely VNGs and ECOGs and VEMPs, and then also those practices that offer tinnitus assessment and retraining therapy. So for those people in the public who are watching this that might be saying, oh, that sounds like me, we have a host of audiologists that are members around South Africa that are able to help. So we will be able to find you someone within your area who is an independent audiologist who focuses and is passionate about that area of audiology that is pertinent to you. So there will be definitely a link, and there on our website as well, the public can have a look to find the audiologist that is close to them who offers those services. And I think that it's been so interesting listening both based on, from an audiologist perspective as well as from a patient's perspective, because I think that instead of Dr. Google, people can now listen and have almost a conversation with an audiologist about the various concerns. So it's very exciting.
Absolutely. And I would like to say almost a plea to the public, if you are watching this, please do, if you experience any perception of tinnitus, that ringing sound or buzzing sound, sometimes you even feel like you're hearing music, sometimes it can be almost like a choir that you're hearing, or strange sounds, please do know that there is something that you can do about it. And the first step is to go and see an audiologist, somebody that you can sit with and discuss what's been happening, and that they can do a comprehensive evaluation so that they can also provide the correct treatment options. There really is help out there, and there's something that you can do about it. So if you experience tinnitus or vertigo, please do that. Take the next step, go and see somebody. It is ultimately about your quality of life.
Another thing that we want to also tell the public is that sometimes bothersome tinnitus can be showing them that something else is going wrong in their body. Obviously, when you're concerned about unilateral tinnitus or pulsatile tinnitus, you can hear your heartbeat, or when there's hearing loss coupled as well as balance or imbalance coupled with unilateral tinnitus, those would all be warning signs definitely to go see your audiologist to have a comprehensive diagnostic audiological evaluation to make sure that we know exactly what we're dealing with. It could be middle ear, it could be inner ear, and then most likely your audiologist will refer you on to someone like an ENT if there is something atypical that we've picked up. So it's really important to not just Google it and read, well, there's nothing I can do about it, I must just live with it, and then you don't do anything in terms of even assessing it, because very often you might be missing something that could have been resolved quite easily. And sometimes it's blood pressure, sometimes it's cholesterol, sometimes it's a tumor, sometimes it's cancer. I don't know if you've seen any other types of pathology that's related or connected, cardiovascular, so neurological. I mean, it could be anything. And so the key is not to think that it's not curable and not to ignore it.
Yeah, absolutely. Vitally important.
I'm so excited to have discussions like this with independent audiologists, because we are so passionate about the area of audiologists that we want to help people with. And it's so important for the public to understand that there's such a massive difference between seeing an independent audiologist compared to seeing anyone else who is either selling online or selling via retail. So we urge the public, rather do your homework when you're choosing your service provider. And that's what we want to increase knowledge and exposure to all of our members as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Cara. I really appreciate it. It was really nice talking to you.
It was amazing. Thank you, Sybrand. And to get to know you also as a human. Lovely. And how does it feel being at the moment the only male part of APPF?
It's something that I'm used to. I grew up in a house with 3 sisters. So it's not strange to me at all.
Well, you are certainly the rose amongst the thorns.
Thanks, Cara.
And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, no, thanks to you. Again, I really appreciate it. And I'm humbled by the fact that you invited me for this interview. And yeah, looking forward to independent audiologists and their future.
Oh, me too. Me too. It's going to be great.